My name is Tunde, and I'm one of the co-hosts of this meetup. So before we start, I would like to just do a quick introduction. So I'm one of the co-hosts, like I said earlier. So the reason why we're having this meetup, normally we discuss topics on DevOps, but we decided like lately, since a lot of people are interested in about getting certification in DevOps. So we decided to create like a special series that dedicates itself to just getting certification, because we know certification is very important, in your career as a DevOps engineer, someone that works in DevOps related field. So that's why we are creating this special series. It's going to be different from our main meetup, which is where we invite guests and people talk about like different DevOps topic. But this series, which we are going to be having every 2 weeks, is just going to be dedicated to getting certification. So today we'll be talking about the CKA. But before we do that, I would like just someone to introduce yourself and just your name and what you do and why you're interested in this particular meetup or in this series. Anybody? Anyone, just unmute yourself and just introduce yourself. My name is this is what I do, and this is why I want to come to this meetup, or this is why I came to this meetup, so that I can learn more about this, or so that I can prep for my certification, stuff like that. Anybody? Anyone?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
My name is Prasanna Kutua, and in the short name PK.
Hi.
And I am new. Hi. Hello, everybody. And I'm kind of new to AWS and the cloud. And in from there, I just got into this DevOps, and now much kind of Dockerization and interested more in learning about Kubernetes. So want to get certified. So interested in that. So that's
Oh, nice. Welcome. That's the reason why we started this, and this is why we are trying to create this series, this special series for people who have that particular interest. Now, just to move on, and thanks for like PK, thanks for introducing yourself. I really appreciate that. So just to move on, the person that will be actually like mainly hosting this meetup is my co-host. His name is also Tunde. So he's the one that is going to be going through the meetup for today, and without, because this meetup is just for 1 hour, it's just 1 hour. So without taking much of your time, I'm going to hand over to him, and he's going to like talk about what we are going to be doing today, the whole process of getting CKA, and also discuss some of the sample question from the from the exam, or that you are likely to meet in the exam, which is, I'm very sure, why most of us are here today, to learn about the exam. So let's give, let me hand over to him. All right. So let me, okay. Can everyone see my slides? Okay.
Yeah, I can see the slides now.
Oh, nice.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, guys. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Balatunde Oluisa. I am a DevOps engineer, and I'm certified in Kubernetes certified Kubernetes administrator and a certified Kubernetes application developer. And I also co-host this DevOps meetup along with Tunde. Most people know me as Tunde also, and I love Kubernetes. So right now, I have a question. So do we have anyone here that has taken the certified Kubernetes administrator exam, or anybody who has registered for it, or someone who's yet to register, or like that is just starting this? If anyone here has taken the exam, I would like to know what you like to get from this presentation today before I jump into what we have planned out. So do we have any other CKAs in here, or people who are already registered for the exam?
I didn't register for the exam, but I registered for the training on cloud, the site from the Linux Foundation.
Nice. So for most people who are just starting, thank you so much for your response. For most people who are just starting, or they're just learning about Kubernetes. So you're wondering, what is Kubernetes? So Kubernetes is an open source platform for management and orchestration of containerized applications and clusters. The Kubernetes project was initially developed by Google, and in 2015, after gaining popularity, it was given to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation to further work on the project. Now, what's the Certified Kubernetes Administrator program? So this exam is more or less like an exam for individuals and companies to be able to show their skills and expertise while working within the Kubernetes cluster. So this is an opportunity for individuals to show their expertise with Kubernetes. The Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam is just one of its kind. So there are actually three certification exams that the CNCF they created recently. So we have the Certified Kubernetes Administrator, the Certified Kubernetes Application Developer, and also there is also the Certified Kubernetes Service Provider. So this is actually for the companies. So I think it takes you having three Certified Kubernetes Administrator to become a company that is a certified service provider. So some of the things you need to know about the exam is, it's created by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It costs $300 with one free retake. The passing score is 70%, 74%, and the certification is valid for 2 years. So I also dropped the link in the slide that allows you to, for those who would like to register, allows you to go on there to register. One quick thing, just so I don't forget to mention this. So the exam costs $300 with one free retake, but there's something about the free retake policy. So if you register for this exam and you miss the exam on the exam date without rescheduling prior to that, so you miss the option of the free retake also. So you'd have to pay the $300 all over again to take the exam. So the free retake only counts when you attempt the exam then and you fail it. Now, so how is this exam set up? So the exam is proctored online. When I took it, you can only use the Google Chrome browser. And it takes 3 hours to take this exam. There are 24 questions. It's all hands-on. This exam is all hands-on. And, the environment is a Ubuntu 16.04 environment. So, and also you have access to Kubernetes documentation. So you're only allowed to use the Kubernetes.io documentation during the exam, and you have only one tab. You're only allowed to open one tab besides the exam tab. So how to pass the CPA exam? Just practice, 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 practice. So to get down to it, I took the Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam a couple of weeks ago. I think precisely 3 weeks ago. And when I took the exam, it was quite different from all other exams that I've taken. This was more hands-on. It had to do with something that you must have had a lot of experience working on. When I mean a lot of experience, I don't mean having years of experience, but hands-on, at least having hands-on approach working with Kubernetes. Having played with the Kubernetes cluster. So there were 24 questions in the exam. One of the biggest challenges with working when I took the exam was the time. So I had 3 hours to answer 24 questions. Each question had to do with different cases. So some of the questions in the exam, without breaking the non-disclosure agreement with CNCF, some of the questions in the exam had to do with fixing deployments, creating deployments, creating new ports, scaling them, and some of them had to do with getting the cluster states LD. Being that this is a series, we're going to tackle this gradually. So for today, we're just going to look into pods. For the demo that I'll be doing a demo on pods and deployments and services. And the way I'll be approaching this is the best way to approach it during the exam. So I'll be trying to do this for efficiency purposes. So now, when I took the exam, what did the environment look like? It was an Ubuntu 16.04 environment. So you had a terminal inside the web browser that, with different questions. There were 8 clusters, and they specify when you move from a cluster to another cluster. So when I started, one thing I tried to do was I tried not to spend too much time on questions that were taking me more than 10 minutes. So if it's taking you more than 10 minutes, there's a notepad feature during the exam where you get to write down maybe a number that you skipped. So you can go back to a question after you skipped it. So one important thing about the exam is, try to, before going into the exam, understand how to use certain Kubernetes, Linux command line, like, the wget, understand certain places where you find manifest for pods for deployments on Kubernetes.io, so that when you're taking the exam, you already know exactly where you're going to actually get the information you want. There's nothing that can help you more during this exam than to keep on practicing. So you practice, look at the CNCF curriculum, keep on practicing, just keep on practicing. To get ready for this exam, I used the Linux Academy course. I used the Kubernetes.io documentation, and also the Kelsey Hightower's Kubernetes the hard way to actually get ready for the exam. Now, prior to taking the exam, I had experience working with Kubernetes. So I've actually been looking at the Kubernetes project for a while now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have spent like a year or two working with Kubernetes before you take the exam. But to take this exam, certain things are very, very important understand the concepts of creating ports, creating deployments, how to create replicas, how to scale deployment replicas, how to deal with networking services, exposing deployments as services. Those are some of the things that would help you with this exam. So tips and tricks, like I said, be very, very fluent with command line. Some of the things I would have mentioned that you should know as far as command line tools, besides the W you get, is the SED, which is the stream editor. But when I took the CKA, I realized that, for some of the things I used the SED for, I could have used the Kubernetes kubectl set command to actually take care of those questions. So understanding system D and how to restart system D services is also one thing that you need to know before taking this exam. You could have a question that had to do with you, bringing back a node that is down, and maybe the issue with that cluster is probably, a service not running. It could be the kubelet not running, or maybe kube proxy, or it could even be Docker not running. One other thing I noticed from the CPA exam is, we had certain questions that you had to get certain information from the pod. So one way to get certain information from the pod is using JSON path to actually format outputs, and I'll be showing what I mean by this, during the demo. Some other command line tools that you probably need to know is the grep command, cort. The cort command would also come in handy, because you can use that to actually get certain fields whenever you from a file. So I found the cort command very useful also, and the grep command. So I also left some links here to the CNCF certification expert page and the curriculum, and also a link to the kubectl cheat sheet, Kubernetes the hard way, and some of the things that I think that you would find very useful to take this exam. Also, CoopExplain, for those who are already working with Kubernetes, CoopExplain is going to come in handy during this exam. So CoopExplain allows you, so let's say for instance, you're trying to write a manifest, and there's a particular specification you're trying to give, and you actually don't know exactly where to fit in that specification. So you can do something like CoopExplain port, CoopExplain deployment, and then, or CoopExplain deployment.spec, and then pass in an option that says -- recursive that gives you more information and exactly how to use those specifications. So this is an example for those who are just starting Kubernetes, or people who been working with Kubernetes. I did for the CKA. I don't remember it having any questions that I had to have you write a manifest using JSON, but all the manifests I saw during the exam were all YAML formatted. So it is important to actually know how to create a Kubernetes manifest using YAML. So let's jump down to the demo. So before I go into the demo, I'd like to know, does anybody have any question? Maybe I might have skipped something.
Are you going to share this slide deck on the meetup page, just so we can refer back to some of these links? I didn't get a chance to write them all down.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
we'll be doing that.
Thank you. Otherwise, I think you're going at a good pace.
All right. Thank you. So Any other questions?
And what do you use to practice? You use like Minicool. You use Docker has a new version, right? Has this new version that supports Kubernetes as well for Windows and for Mac. So what do you use? What you recommend?
Right. So just for this, so while I was getting ready for this exam, I actually use different environments, but I would suggest for someone who's just starting, if you're just starting to prepare for this exam, it was a single Minikube cluster. So Minikube is a Kubernetes, a single cluster for Kubernetes that you can install that allows you to do most of the things that are required for this exam. So that is enough. But maybe when you're going to try to do something like creating a Kubernetes cluster, so maybe you're working on the Kelsey Hightower Kubernetes the hard way GitHub, you probably need to work on on Google or Google Cloud or Amazon to actually build out your own Kubernetes cluster. But honestly, I think a Minikube cluster should be enough. Should be enough to take this to get ready for this exam.
Okay, thanks. One other question is, do you have, in your experience, do you think security and networking are big components of the test?
Well, I do not remember seeing a lot of security and networking questions on the exam. So I don't think it was heavily focused on that. But it is very, if it's in the curriculum, I would advise you to actually, practice working with that. If you don't find it in the CKA, you probably find it in CKA exam.
Okay, thanks.
How many years of experience do you have of using Kubernetes at workplaces?
Okay, so I started looking at the Kubernetes project early 2016. I got more involved, late 2016, and started doing a lot more with it. But if you're asking for the exam purposes, you actually don't need to have been involved with Kubernetes that long to take the exam. So it's like preparing for most other exams, right? There's a difference between preparing for an exam and actually using a particular application, right? So preparing for an exam, you're working with the curriculum, you're trying to get ready for the questions that they probably were trying to use from the curriculum, from what you've seen in the curriculum, right? So to take this exam, if you can go to the curriculum and target each section and make sure you master like how to like I said, create deployments, scale deployments, do things like rolling updates. I think you should honestly be fine. I started looking at the Kubernetes.io documentation for the questions that were specified, like for the sections that were specified in the curriculum, early this year. And, I finished it and I left it. And then, one time I just said, what, let me just go ahead and just take this exam. And I just went to take it. So I think you really don't need to have spent, like maybe a year or two working with Kubernetes before you take the exam. One important thing is, you keep on practicing. And the reason why I keep on stressing, I can't stress practicing enough. And the reason is because efficiency is very, very important during this exam. Because it's time-based, once you create an object or you modify an object, you really don't have enough time to actually go back to confirm if, whatever you created actually was created, or maybe whatever you modified or deleted actually got deleted. So let's say your familiarity with the environment plays a key role in how you perform during this exam. So you understanding that, you know, you run a command like pipctl delete port and specify the name is actually going to delete that port. Or you use commands like pipctl set, and you understand what those commands are actually going to do. As long as your exit code, like maybe as long as whenever you run those commands, it doesn't throw an error. So you expect a certain behavior from, you know, the commands that you ran. So that would give you more confidence. So let's say you, for instance, let's say you start taking the exam and then you see a question that says, you know, create a deployment that has you to actually have multiple containers that are sharing a particular volume. And, you know, you've been working with the Kubernetes documentation and you've seen something like this before, you know, easily you understand, you know, what this is supposed to look like when you create the deployment. So familiarity is a big thing for this exam. You really need to have that hands-on practice before you take this exam. This is not an exam whereby, you know, you cram and you go and take the exam.
You mentioned earlier that the familiarity with the manifest files is important. So how would you remember, I mean, if there's no reference, how would you remember the format? Because I noticed the spaces are very important, how it's aligned, and the syntax of those commands, right, inside the manifest files.
Right. So let's do this. So one thing that you can do is, so when I said get familiar with the Kubernetes.io documentation, what I meant is, you know, go into the documentation, and during the demo, I'll be showing you certain ways. In particular, like I searched for certain things during the exam. So I was already familiar with all this. Like from what you've seen in curriculum, you're very sure that you're going to get a question that has to do with, you know, you creating a pod. That has to do with you creating a deployment. So now, before taking the exam, with what I'm telling you right now, one thing you probably would do is, well, I'm going to go onto the Kubernetes.io page, and I'm going to go type in, you know, deployment.yaml. And then I'm going to find a specification file and maybe do now, one other thing I forgot to mention is that during the exam, you actually can copy on the terminal. So you can do a copy and paste on the terminal. So one thing that would really help you, and that's why I said wget or call command is, you know, you use the wget command and copy the link from the page and, you know, download that into a file. That's one way. So let's say you search for deployment.yaml and then you find an NGX deployment, then you paste it into your terminal. Like you copy that link, you paste that link into your terminal and edit that file to match what you're trying to do. So I'll be showing, I'll show like certain ways you can find this YAML files during the exam. So there are actually several ways to actually copy those YAML files. And there are a lot of ways to do it. Another way you can do it is there's a dry run command in Kubernetes with the command line too that allows you to actually create a manifest file, but actually not deploying it. So, and you can pass that into a file and, you know, edit it to do what you're trying to do. I don't know if did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very good. Because to me, it's a big challenge to remember the syntax. How many spaces you have to indent, right? And the keywords, all that.
Right, and one thing is, you know, provided that there's enough time, I can show you certain ways to actually understand the Kubernetes YAML syntax during this presentation. So that's one of the things I have planned to do during this presentation, to actually break down certain things that I expect that, you know, maybe some people might have challenges with, and maybe that I expect that would help people, you know, actually get things done faster. The whole idea of this series is to actually show a faster way of getting this done. So there are several ways to do it, but show a faster and efficient way to do this, and the right way also.
Yeah, anything you can help to speed up, that will be helpful, because the time is the factor, right?
Right.
Also, are there any questions, not specific question that you have to answer? Are there anything like more advanced topics like English and what was the other ones? Filters, what the filters or something else?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I remember seeing a couple of questions with filters, and so those are the Kubectl or cheat sheet. You know, it should be something that could help for that. And also, during this demo, like, you know, if I miss it, I can show that to you. Now that you mentioned it, I'm going to try to show, you know, how to filter out certain information.
Okay, thanks.
There's a question from Hamilton. He said, can you go to the testing center or do you take it at home?
So this exam, it's an exam you can take from anywhere. So you don't need to actually go to a testing center. You can take it.
BSA.
I'm sorry?
Again.
Oh, I'm sorry. So as I was saying, I thought there was a question. So you can actually take this exam from anywhere, provided that, you know, there's nobody walking around. There's no, you know, you don't have people making noise during the house. So you have to be in the room alone while taking this exam, wherever you're taking it from. So those are the only requirements for the exam. So you don't necessarily have to go to a testing center.
Do we need to know a lot of details about using Docker?
Well, if you're going to be using Kubernetes, I think it is important to understand, you know, what Docker is doing, you know, and what we're doing. Because the reason why we're using Kubernetes is because we're trying to maintain. So wait, let me retract my statement, then just go through this in a much better way. So the Kubernetes exam uses Docker as runtime, you know, as the runtime containers for this exam, which is by default the container that is being used for the exam, right? So to understand certain things, like let's say you have a question and, you know, you're trying to create an image and you realize that that image keeps on throwing an error. Like you probably want to try to understand why is this Docker image having an error before actually trying to find out, you know, is this a Kubernetes issue or is this a Docker? Is this an issue with the image? Also, like, you know, questions you probably want to understand what Docker services needs to be running for you to be able to use images or to spin up containers, right? So I would say, yeah, it is important that you understand, you know, that how Docker plays into all this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I go straight to the demo? And also, guys, like, you know, if you feel like you can, you know, you're not able to ask your questions right now, you know, there's going to be a link. There is a link to the Slack channel actually on this page, and also there will be one in the chat room whereby you can post your questions, and you would definitely have a lot of people, you know, reply to you. Like, this is a very, very huge community of people that have been working with Kubernetes. So people that can explain concepts better than I am explaining it to, you know, people that have had a different experience working with Kubernetes also. So, and the certification exam. So, and also if you take the exam, in the coming weeks, please feel free to post in the Slack channel and talk about your experience also, because it will help people who are planning to take it also, you know, do better in the exam. into demo. There you go. So for this demo, I will be using the Docker for Mac. So it's a Minikube cluster, but using Docker for Mac. So right now, just to show you what my current, can everybody see my screen? Let's see.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just to show. Right now, I'm just going to run a kubectl get port, and we can see that there are no resources running on my environment. So during the exam, I'm trying to place this in an exam scenario, right? So we have a question that says, create a pod, an Nginx pod, and you're thinking, all right, what's the fastest way for me to get this done? So easy way to do this. One thing you can do is either do it, interactively on the command line or create a manifest file. And I'll show you how to get manifest files. And since I'm doing this on my Mac, so I'll be using call to download from the Kubernetes.io website. But just to do this interactively, so we're trying to create a pod, so an Nginx image pod. So you run kubectl command, run, then you specify the name of the image. So in this case, Nginx. Then specify the image. So in this case, we'll be using the latest image. By default, it pulls the latest, so you can either specify latest right behind this or just do it this way. And this, by default, should create so it already created a Nginx pod. So if you kubectl get pods, so it's going to show you that you have one pod running. So the other way you can do this is, so let me go ahead and delete this. All right. So another way you can do this is pass the -- dry run command into this and specify the output format. So what I did here is, so the previous command I ran, what I did is I passed the -- dry run command, which actually, essentially what it's doing is it's running the command, but actually not creating the specifications. So, and the -o YAML is, the O here is a short form for output, and YAML is like the syntax you want it to come out with. So this case, this creates the syntax, and what you can do is you can pass this into a file like file.yaml, or whatever you decide on naming it, and it pushes this output into that file. So let me do this. As you can see, we have that inside of the file right now. So that's one of the two ways you can do this. One other way we can do this is, let me create, Let me show you how to use the Kubernetes documentation for this purpose.
Yeah, this is cool. Is there a way to get the manifest YAML file after you run the command? Is it still without using dry run?
Is there a way to?
Let's say you run kubectl run and deploy, right? The whole thing is deployed.
Right.
And at that time, you didn't capture the manifest file. After it's deployed, is there another way to go back to, hey, what is deployed? What is the YAML file that is deployed?
Right, right. Yes, there is another way to do that, and I'll show that. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. I'll show that.
Okay, thanks.
Right. So now I've gone to documentation, right, and I'm looking for a port specification, right. So one thing is I know one of the places you can find is commands. Type in commands.yaml, and you go to maybe the first one. And as you can see, this is a pod specification right here. And one thing you can do is either click this button right here, and basically what you've done is you've copied to clipboard. And if you open back your terminal and do a maybe VI and you paste that command in there, and you have that specification inside of it. So one thing during the exam you want to keep track of is, the exam, most questions the exam is going to tell you what they want you to name the pod. So in the metadata section, you probably need to name this pod something else, right? So you edit this name to actually match what the exam is asking for. And, if it's not asking you to provide any commands, so you can take this out also, take the arguments out, and we can create this by, so let's go ahead and save this. And as you can see, the pod command demo has been created, which is the name that was specified in the metadata. So as you can see, the command got completed. Right now it's showing, okay, so this might be an opportunity for us to actually debug something, right? So right now it's saying 0 of 1 ready. So kubectl, yeah, all right. So someone asks, is there a way to actually see that file again? So one way to do it is to pass in the name of the command of the pod, then pass in the dashboard and specify the format you want it to come out in. So in this case, we want it to come out in YAML format. So if you do that, it's going to give you all this information about the pod. But the only difference right now is it gives you information of the current state of the pod also with it. So right now you have additional things like, the namespace is running in, the volume mount, DNS policy, and a couple of all other things. And lastly, at the end also, you can see the status also in here.
So when they'll ask for, let's say that they ask to create a Nginx pod, is there a distinction with creating a deployment that creates the pod, or do you necessarily need to create the pod itself as you've done here without the deployment?
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't get that question.
So let's say they ask create an Nginx pod. Is there a distinction between creating a deployment an Nginx deployment that creates the pod, as opposed to doing this YAML and creating the pod only without the deployment itself.
Yes, yes, yes. There is a distinction. Now, the distinction is the controller. So the deployment is actually a controller. It allows you to actually. So for the deployment, you can increase the replicas. You can increase the replicas of the containers that you're running, right? Let's say for a single deployment, right now we have a pod that says command demo, right? That is running the Debian image. Let me show that to you right here. It's running the Debian image, right? Right now, there is no way for us to actually increase the number of this particular command demo container that is running. But when you're using a deployment, you actually have a way to actually change the state by increasing the number of replicas you have. So you can pass in the -- replicas to these and increase it. So there is actually a difference between the pod and the deployment.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, one other point I noticed myself was that if you create a deployment, right, the pod, you can kill it. Even if you create one replica, after you kill the pod, the controller will recreate another pod just for that deployment.
Right. And that is one of the reasons why we use the deployment also.
Yes.
Yeah, it was just for the exam's sake. I didn't know if it was okay to just create a deployment for an Nginx deployment as opposed to just creating a pod, if it just asks for a pod.
Yeah, I would say if it says create a pod, you create a pod only, and if it says create a deployment, because I know there are questions that says create a pod and there are questions that says create a deployment.
Okay, thanks.
So,
did you ever get asked to create a cluster or this? And plus, like if the cluster is already there, you just like a Google container engine, you just take the cluster, or you have to create a cluster.
okay, so during this exam, we didn't need to actually create any clusters. All the clusters have been created, but there were some clusters that we needed to make amendments to, that you probably would need to make amendments to, like maybe add a node that is failing, fix a node or add a new node to the cluster. Probably do some, TLS, add some TLS into the cluster. So those were the questions that I had to do with, those were the questions that I had to do with maybe setting up the cluster. There was no one that actually have you set up the whole cluster from scratch.
Okay. Maybe you go through some other time just to how to troubleshoot, like you need to add a node if the node goes down, stuff like that.
Right. So like I said, since this is a series, and I know that there's going to be a lot of people having different questions, and this is why I wanted more people to get more involved in this Slack channel, right? For questions that we probably won't be able to answer today, and maybe you're ready to take the exam and maybe you're still having issues with it, if you post it on the Slack channel, I'm very sure there will be somebody who can give you like a guide towards how you're going to get that question solved. Tunde is always available. I am always available to actually respond on the Slack channel. So one other thing I wanted to show, so I just showed how to, quickly, so I showed you how to find a pod, how I found the pods during the exam. So let me show you how I found my deployments. So now, to get a deployment, so one thing I can do is type in deployment, so manifest file for deployment. So you type in deployment, the YAML. And there is one right here. So this is another one, right? So one thing you can do is you can either copy these or copy the link and go back to your terminal and just run maybe call or wget. So let me expand this. So one thing you can run call and paste that and specify the file. So right. Okay. There you go. And so that way I already copied that manifest. Now to get it to do what I wanted to do, easily what I can just do is, use the VI editor to actually make my changes, the changes I need to make to this deployment.
Yeah, this is a good tip. Very good.
Great, great.
Do you do you know if the dashboard is part of that? Do you ever have to use a dashboard?
No. So
everything's command line.
Yeah, so I'm certain you won't be using the dashboard during the exam.
Okay.
Now, one other way to get this same manifest I just did is to run the kubectl. This exact same manifest is running the kubectl run. Then specifying the name. So in this case, Nginx deployment. Then specify the image, which is Nginx. So this is the image in this case. And also it has 3 replicas running. So we specify the replicas also, which is 3. So I think it has a port, and also it has a container port also of 80. All right, so this is another way to actually get that. Now, if you notice, it shows the creation timestamp and and the status in here. The one way to go over this is to use the export command. Oh wait, what did I just do? Did I make a mistake? Oh, sorry, you won't be able to use the export for this, but the driver, I'm sorry. So the export is only, I think you will only be able to use the export for something that's already running in the cluster. So yeah, basically this is another way to do this, to get your output and pass this into a file also and edit it. So one thing we haven't done is I think we're running out of time. I'm going to quickly create this deployment that we just copied down. So share the screen. And also expose it as a service. So kubectl. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and create the deployment. Okay, so we just created deployment. Deployment. So another way, if you don't want to keep on typing deployment, you can just specify deploy in the name of the deployment. In this case, Nginx, or just type in enter. Since we have just one running. So as you can see, we have 3 desired and 3 currently up. So now to expose the deployment, the quickest and fastest way to do this is just do a kubectl expose, specify the deployment. This could either be deployment or deploy. And name of the deployment in this case is Nginx deployment. And you can specify the name you want to call this. So let's call this service. By default, it names it the name of the deployment. So we can call it something else. So maybe a test service. So we can specify what type of service we're trying to create. So let's say we're trying to create by default it creates a cluster IP. So let's go with something different this time around. So let's go with node port.
Once the service is created, is there a way to change that service type? Let's say from node port to like a load balancer, without bringing it down.
Yes, without bringing it down during the exam.
Right. Or basically without deleting it. Bring it down, probably you have to bring it down, but without deleting the service.
Okay, so one way to do this is, without deleting the service, one way to do this is you might have to change. So each service, the way that the service tracks what it's actually managing is it has a label inside of it, right? So if you change that label, you can point that label, it has something called a selector, sorry. So, and that selector can be pointed to something else, so like to the other service, and now that service is working in tandem with the deployment, the new deployments you've created.
Okay.
Is it possible to patch the service as opposed to creating another one?
To patch the service, yes, you can do that. So we just, okay, so for instance, we just created kubectl get service, right? So we just created the test service right here, right?
Right. You got no port.
Right. And so one way to actually edit the service is you can use the kubectl edit service and pass the name. And right here, you can make changes to whatever you would like to make changes to. Now, mind you, sometimes there are certain things that you probably might not be able to change. It could be the label. You might not be able to change the label or add an additional label to this, right? And one way you can fix this issue is, let's say you have a question that says, add that this service is already running, add an additional label to this. And say, for instance, you come in here and you try to add a different app label, and then you try to save this. I expect this to throw a fit. Oh, well, it didn't, surprising. But let's say you run into an issue, right? And then you make a change to a service, and it tells you can't make that change. One thing you can do is you can pass in, so you can run the kubectl get service and test service, and pass in, specify to get it in a YAML format, and export. So what this does is it passes the YAML file for that service, and you can pass this into a file, then replace that file with the new changes. So call this new service.
Then you do the apply, and then you do the kubectl apply.
No, you run the kubectl replace command.
Replace. Okay.
Right. So replace dash F in the new service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it replaces the old one.
What is the difference here between replace and apply? If I just modify the, let's say I just modify the type from low port to load balancer, what is the difference if I do apply that new file versus replace that file?
Okay, so I think Tunde wants to speak to this.
Okay, so I mean,
All right, go
now,
ahead.
now based on my experience so far with Kubernetes, now if you I do a lot of like apply, replace because I work, mainly with Kubernetes in production. So now it's if you are trying to do apply, what apply tries to do is try to make what you have in your cluster matches what is specified in your YAML file. So if you have a file and you put apply, Kubernetes will try to create which objects you have in that file. Now replace, what it does is replace it. It patches your current. It tries to patch your current deployment to match what you have. So think apply as it creates a new object, and replace as it patches what you have in current deployment to match what you have in the specified file, right? So in this case, when you say replace a new service.yaml, it goes into your cluster, finds the service object, and tries to replace it with what is specified in the new YAML file. So just like Tunde mentioned, sometimes it's going to throw a fit, like, hey, you can't do this. For example, there's some information about a port that you cannot patch. So you have to delete the existing port. You cannot patch certain information. So it's going to tell you in the same process. So just apply, create, replace, patch. Just think of it that way. All right, that's it.
Okay, that seems to be the opposite of the word of replace versus apply.
It wasn't clear. Sunday wasn't clear.
I'm sorry?
The explanation of replace and it wasn't clear, at least not to me. I don't know.
Okay. I can go over it again. So what I said was, if you do apply is going to try to create the object. In this case, the object that was specified is a service, right? So it's trying to create the service object in your cluster. That's apply. For replace, it will try to update. So patch, it's like update. It will try to update your existing service to match what you specified in your YAML file.
It sounds
now,
like the opposite of
it's trying to replace,
right?
If it's something that it can do, it will let you know. If it's something that it cannot do, it will throw a fit and tell you, hey, you cannot do this, you cannot do this particular kind of patch because this is not allowed by the admission controller. So those kind of stuff takes place during replace. Apply creating objects, replace, update existing objects.
So if I understand you right, apply is essentially replace.
Does that make sense?
Is it right? Your explanation of apply is almost replacing the previous object. You're creating a new object.
I'm sorry?
Is apply, if I understand it, apply a YAML file is creating a brand new object, delete the old object, right? Create a new object. But replace sounds like Tunde was explaining, by replace is trying to make amends, trying to make changes to the existing object without deleting the object.
Oh, okay. So let me try to give my own explanation to that. So, and apply, the difference, my understanding of the difference between apply and replace is, so if you have a manifest file right now and you run a kubectl apply to that manifest file, it would create that new manifest if that manifest has not been, created, right? With kubectl apply, it would create that new manifest, right?
In that case, it's equivalent to create.
Right. But the difference between it and the kubectl now, with the kubectl replace, the kubectl replace command is used when you have a, let's say you run a kubectl create with a file called test.yaml, right? And then you realize that, oh, one of your developers or somebody, your cluster administrator made a mistake with something in the specification, and you want to make changes to that specification. One thing you can do is you can run a kubectl replace to that exact same file. So kubectl replace actually switches what is already running and creates a new one from that same thing. So most of the specification are exactly the same thing, but it removes the old one and replaces it with the new one.
That's my understanding. I think is the opposite of what Tunde was trying to explain. To my understanding, is replace is going to, let's say you're already running version 1 of the manifest file, and
right.
You make a change. Let's say we call it version 2 of the YAML file, right? If you do a replace, you would remove the version 1, then apply version 2. That's my understanding. If you do just apply, you will keep the version 1, we will add the delta into version 1. So you're still running version 1, you make a changes to version 1.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
All right, guys, I'm going to take one more question, and one last question. Okay, if there is no other question, I'm going to give the control back to Tunde. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you for joining us today. It was great. I enjoyed interacting with every one of you. Like I said, if we have anybody that is registering for the exam or that is taking the exam, and also I'll be creating a blog. About the exam and be posting it on the Slack channel that might provide some of the information that I probably missed today. So if you take the exam during this series, please feel free to update on the Slack channel and talk about your experience.
Yeah, this is very good. Thank you for your time.
Hello. All right. So just to this is going to be like a series. We are going to have this one more like every 2 weeks, and we are going to make the video available, and the slide also we will make it available on the chat, the Slack chat room. There's like a special, like a kind of how do I say this? There's like a channel that we created for the CK. So if you have any question, and someone in the community can go there and also answer a question. Now, for example, like the question that we just asked right now regarding like, hey, what exactly happens when you apply changes, when you replace changes, and when you try to patch changes, right? So those kind of questions, we can have this kind of discussion in the Slack channel, and if you try to go back to it and just use that as a reference point. And next week we are going to have move on to the next section. We keep going over some of the questions that will be asked in the exam. So I mean, it's not going to be like the exact question, but something that will most likely come up in the exam. Okay. Thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it. And our next meetup that we are going to have, the main meetup itself, we have a company coming to present. Right now, we don't want to like give out the name of the company, but we are going to schedule the meetup, and we also hope to see everybody there. Thank you very much, guys. All right.